That was Vernal Pools by Shebad, and you're listening to WUWU-LP-FM 100.1 Frankfort, Alberta, in beautiful Alberta, Michigan. We have a wonderful guest in the studio, traveling far from Bel Air, representing Crosshatch. Taylor Reed, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
And I Taylor, I know Taylor because because of like anarchist festivals, first of all, apparently, and music and that whole area. But he is a writer who contributes to Crosshatch's bi-weekly newsletter and has his own writing, and he's going to be much better at telling us about what it is and how it actually works. So we're grateful to have Taylor Reed in the studio with us this morning and to inform us. So we're going to learn a little bit more about him and where he comes from and how he got here, and then we're going to do some readings. He's going to read us some excerpts from a few of his pieces, and we're going to discuss them in turn. So Taylor, tell us about give us a little snapshot of like what's your life like right now and where does your writing fit into it?
Yeah, that's something I've been trying to figure out over the past 2 weeks. We've had a lot going on in our household, so trying to find the balance between what life looks like at home and then what life looks like at work has been interesting. I work for Crosshatch Center for Art and Ecology. They've been around for 20 years now, doing work at the intersection of art and farming, local economy, ecology, all sorts of stuff like that. And like you said, my role with them is largely curating a bi-weekly newsletter called The Whole Field. Finding artwork for that, writing things, making videos, reaching out to people just to put that together.
Okay. And what kind of writings, tell us about Crosshatch in case people don't know about them.
Yeah. Well, Crosshatch is like I mentioned, it's an organization that delves into a lot of different areas. One of the things that they're most well known for is the Northern Michigan Small Farm Conference, which is coming up in August. I think tickets might be available today.
Nice.
But one of the reasons why we put together the whole field is because Crosshatch's work can be kind of difficult to encompass very briefly. And so I write about a whole lot of different things and kind of draw these tangents and weave it all back to the organization itself so that people have an idea of what the work that Crosshatch does actually is. As far as what I write about, no one necessarily dictates that to me. I write about the things that keep me up in the middle of the night, the things that I don't know. So everything that I'm going to be reading today, those are things that I'm interested in, not necessarily things that I'm an expert in. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt.
Always. So an exploration of personal interests that gets to be shared into the world through this organization. I'm sure they're grateful to have you. And it is a lot, right? Because Crosshatch is like encompassing like humans, art, ecology, and it's like those are kind of the same thing as life and farming. Now you've got food in there and plants. It's just like this like very human experience all being like pushed together and in a big field. So the whole field now is something is this newsletter. We can kind of get tastes of the organization through your writing. And tell us, let's go on to the first one, and then we can hear after that. We can maybe hear a little bit more about what brought you into writing. So let's start with the first reading and tell us, what is it called and when did you write it?
Sure. I think we might start with a write-up about hunting, if you don't mind.
Well, you're wearing the right hat for it this morning.
Perfect.
Got some hunter's orange.
That's right.
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is a write-up. It's part of a series of writings. I did 2 of them, and Brad Kick did 1 of them as well. But I'm going to start with the first writing in this series. It's called An Opening Day Series, Part 1, Why Consider Hunting. I didn't grow up in a hunting household, but I did grow up appreciating the woodlands. My grandparents' West Michigan forest was a never-ending source of fun. We'd make days of scaling upturned roots and caverns of wind throw, losing shoes in the insatiable muck, wading the creek in search of the ends, and peering for salamanders under just about anything. Of all the enticements, deer encounters meant the most to me. Even as I grew older, to stumble across one and for it to sense your presence, to lock eyes, stillness and connection, respect, empathy, and compassion, all bundled into one intense but soft moment, only interrupted by the brief flick of its tail. And then for the doe, or the buck, or the fawn, whatever it was that instant to stay, that seemed like a pinnacle, an apex. These weren't brazen deer, used to the tourist's hand. I like to think that there was an element of trust when they stayed put. Communion. So how did I move from there to having a venison freezer in the basement? Did I abandon standing in wonder and care to pursue something more violent? I didn't grow up in a hunting household, but I did grow up in a household attuned to virtue and ethics. Compassion for the other, restraint in not taking more than you need, an appreciation for the outdoors, and the encouragement of curiosity for the myriad and complex ways that the world works. As my brother and I would leave elementary school, we'd saunter, aimlessly and slowly. Heads down, we'd kick at biota, following whatever creature paths we might uncover. Dad would wait in the parking lot, sitting in the Plymouth with the faux wood grain paneling we so enjoyed peeling away, watching, waiting, never rushing us, never honking, never complaining. To an extent because of this environment, and perhaps to an extent also due to my presumptions and personality, the core idea of hunting, taking a life, repulsed me. To look through a scope, behold a deer, and then pull a trigger seemed unnecessary, and something through which I would take no pleasure. It seemed to be a valid option only within the circumstances of legitimate hunger and need for food, and I was not excessively hungry. My needs were met, my disinterest in hunting stemmed from a personal connection to the spry, four-legged woodlanders and an inclination to avoid unnecessary harm. Eventually, the connection and inclination would play a role in bringing me full circle. I sat in the back of the lecture hall. Careers in biology was an easy evening class. It was long, but all you had to do was pay attention and you'd pass with flying colors. That night, a guest speaker presented on wolf reintroduction efforts in Michigan. When the spirited dialogue quieted, it was clear who in that room came from hunting backgrounds. And it was clear that they had a grounded understanding of conservation, healthy ecosystems, and population dynamics. These young, environmentally minded conservationists understood hunting to be a form of connecting to a place and working towards healthy ecological patterns. They didn't care about trophies or big game vacations. To them, it wasn't about domination or taking life wantonly or pointlessly. They had a fuller picture than I did of balance in the more than human world and what responsible participation could look like. Again, while later working as an environmental educator, taking elementary students out into the forest to learn, I encountered the same thing. The kids in camo jackets almost always had more of an interest in and a better grasp of the workings of the natural world around them than their peers. I had thought hunting created an unnecessary competitive divide between the natural world and humans. I began to entertain the idea that I had it backwards. Hunting might bring the two together, benefiting both. Further, experience on farms taught me about sustenance. By sustenance, I mean what feeds humans and what feeds that which feeds humans, things like plants, soil, and livestock. You can't examine those processes long before finding that life compels death. The two kiss. Talk to mystics, indigenous folks, or even ecologists, and this is not news, but it is something that our Western culture tends to shy away from. Where it seems like that isn't the case, as if life cycles of feeding, regeneration, and energy cycling don't necessitate processes of death, breakdown, and decay, there's a false veil of disconnect. Whether a solely plant-based diet or a supermarket subsistence in which production methods are never encountered, death is foundational, even if unseen. Fossil fuels, peat mining, dried blood as pest repellent, bone meal as an input, even the sources of energy and infrastructure behind vertical veganic farming, all elements of life and death. You can't escape it, but you can do your best considering the circumstances. I was starting to view the best in terms of minimizing disconnect, developing awareness, and trying to aim for patterns of consumption that create localized, comprehensible cycles that work together. Each step towards those cycles is a step away from what are often massive and hazy production schemes rife with extraction, waste, and hidden costs lurking in the shadows. These small cycles describe practices that can look a lot like hunting deer. It's healthy local food, fed and sustained without requiring additional inputs. The deer population as a whole benefits from human engagement, countering the sickness and suffering that come with overpopulation. It draws individuals into active relationships with their places and calls for attention to wildlife patterns and sign. It can be a quieting practice involving patience, but also obtaining a yield. That is all good. It doesn't need to be a celebration of violence. There can be care and connection, and a very real reminder that what you eat becomes you. Doing the harvesting yourself and participating in the entire process leaves an obligation to steward that energy well, because you're intimately aware of what it cost. It can feed you affordably, feed community, and feed a culture of meeting needs locally at an appropriate scale and with others. For these reasons, I developed an interest in hunting, not just any hunting, tender, sober, respectful hunting, and with others committed to practices that preserve dignity. I still questioned whether I'd be able to pull a trigger when it came down to it, and even less so feel afterwards that it was the right thing to do, but I was primed to learn more.
We've got a sweet little we have a sweet audience in the studio today. Yeah, and one of us is a vegetarian, actually. I know, so maybe you're going to convert her with this.
Pescatarian.
Pescatarian. Okay, so still willing to like.
Yeah.
It's not the eyes.
Oh yeah, not the eyes. Mostly environmental impact.
Environmental. Okay. She's open to convincing. So, this is actually a little experiment bubble. Thank you for that first reading. Hunting. Well, I'll just start with my own anecdote because it's what I know, which is I had my first season of hunting this past year, which I only used a compound bow, and so I just feel very much I can relate with what you're experiencing and portraying in that piece, and I think it speaks to a lot of us to be when we think about how do our actions have an impact on our world in terms of not just like fossil fuel impact, but also like are we acting it with compassion? Are we bringing a higher vibration into reality? Are we creating connection as opposed to breaking it down? And I think that those all are sort of the same way of asking the same thing. So thank you for that examination from your perspective. So it sounds like you are hunting now, whereas before you hadn't been. So how many seasons have you been sitting out in the blind?
Yeah, sitting out in the blind 2 seasons.
Okay.
Successful 2 seasons. Successful in sourcing food 1 season.
Okay. And are you with a rifle?
No, with a crossbow.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Sweet. And tell us about how have you had a mentor in that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a good friend in Bel Air, an older guy named Ernie, and I've been helping him with processing deer for a few years now. When it comes to actually hunting, I reached out to what's called the Tip of the Mitt New Hunters Guild.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Over in those parts, and that is a really wonderful mentorship program. It's kind of a guild model where, if you reach out to these folks and you want to learn, you're welcomed into this circle where people are learning about shooting and learning about processing, learning about cooking this up, and meeting together to do all of those things.
And I know that the DNR is really trying to encourage more harvesting, as it's called, of white-tailed deer in Michigan because of overpopulation, which I would attribute to the lack or low attendance of apex predators that would be hunting them in earnest, which would be the wolf and the mountain lion. And so is that the Tip of the Mitt Hunters Guild? Is that something that has been organized in response to the low participation in hunting by young people as sort of a way to promote
Yeah,
participation.
not necessarily as a response to that, but it certainly plays into that. Mike, one of the guys who's been leading this program up, has been very intentional about trying to draw people into this program who did not grow up in hunting households. It's largely geared towards adults who don't have that background. And he's committed to bridging that gap, I guess.
So you're the prime candidate.
I guess so. And
Yeah.
I wrote about it too, and I'm talking about it now. So
Yeah.
prime candidate in more ways than one.
Yeah, right. Like promotion. So what has been an experience that you've had since you started hunting that you didn't expect? Or a feeling?
Yeah.
Lesson?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of my concerns with hunting was, well, like I mentioned in that last write-up, when I pulled the trigger, what do I feel? What's the sense at that point? And that was a huge concern of mine. And on this hunt where I ended up harvesting a deer, at the end of the night, after a lot of hesitation, I ended up pulling the trigger, and we went and hiked out there and found this deer. And in all of that time, the only thing that I felt, well, the things that I felt were powerful senses of gratitude. There is absolutely a sense of sorrow, but such a sense of thankfulness and I guess connection, like a tender connection.
Yeah, that's the word that I was thinking. It's like activating something human, innately human within us.
Yeah.
That's different than eating like a frozen, like vegan patty out of a, of plant-based food. It's like, well, this is food, but like this is food in a way that makes my heart race and open to. Have you experienced any contrast or sort of anything tumultuous in your personal life since you started hunting? Has anybody like has it been controversial for other people around you at all?
No, I don't think so, because I think it's not necessarily something that I go around talking a lot about. And when I do speak with people about it, I tend to couch it similarly to how I just did, with hesitation. And it's for me, I think if I spoke to people about it as a more brash act, then I think I get a lot of feedback.
Yeah, you're bringing a deep amount of reverence to the conversation, and really appreciate that, because I feel like there are also there's probably a whole group of people who fit in that space between seasoned hunting family and environmentalist who is concerned but also lives here and sees all the food system issues and the disconnect with nature. And feels like there must be sort of something in there that's to be discovered.
Yeah. Yeah, and even with those seasoned hunters, even if I view a lot of things very differently than them, in those conversations, what I'm interested in is learning from them. I'm not necessarily there to teach them anything intentionally at that point. I'm there to ask them about things, and sometimes in developing that relationship and that back and forth, there is teaching that goes in both directions.
Well, let's take this time to hear a little bit more about how you came into writing as an art and as a form of expression.
Yeah. I think it began as just journaling, just things that I had to get out of me. I met some successful writers when I was a teenager, just kind of by happenstance. And I, at that point, had some interest in writing, and it was the encouragement of those authors that I guess just kind of put something in the back of my head. And it wasn't until years of following a different career path, working in the world of coffee roasting, quality control, those things, that I actually ended up taking this position with Crosshatch as a writer.
Now I'm remembering the coffee. Um, okay, so and so this is a paid position too to write, right? So that's pretty cool. Like success.
Yeah, it's amazing having people that you really look up to and
Yeah.
learn a lot from who are willing to support you in a way like this. Crosshatch is a very small organization, so we do all do a lot of different things. So I guess even just referring to myself as a writer, I second guess it.
Contributor, creator, wordsmith, certainly expressing yourself and connecting with people through words. Because I really, when I hear you speak, I hear so much of myself. When you read your writings, I'm like, I've thought that makes sense to me. I'll say some things that stuck out to me on that piece is, the ideas of participation versus survival. So like hunting as an act of participation, of connection, versus like, well, I don't need this. I'm not hungry. Like I can go to the grocery store, but there's something deeper going on here that is feeding my soul and not just my stomach. So that act of sustenance, we have to get calories from somewhere. And so what if we could be participating in those small cycles in our local ecology through a mixture of agriculture, wild crafting, wild, foraging, hunting, fishing, because we do live in a time when our resources are stressed. Development is taking wildlands away. So not everyone can go out now and replace all their protein needs with wild food, right? But this like slow, deliberate act of like moving toward something with curiosity and like seeing how it speaks to us, I think is beautiful. And so I just thank you for like speaking words that in a beautiful way with so much talent that I feel super like it's like I feel like it's expressing my inner world as well. And with that, if you have anything to say, but otherwise we could move on to the next piece.